Martin Smith, it is, with Fire in Your Eyes. It's 8 minutes past 8 on this morning drive. Back in studio with me, Alec Avierinos, definitely the fittest man here in the room. In fact, he already has his run in for this morning. I definitely don't. Hey, Alec.
Good morning.
Good to have you back with us.
Great to be with you.
All right, it's Tuesday morning, which means health and wellness, of course, talking all things health and wellness, and it is still the introduction part of the year. I know it's almost February already, but lots of us are still building momentum for the year, and that and a whole lot more we're talking about. What are the elements that you can improve as you go into this new year, and how can you live a healthier and a better and a greater life so that you can run in the fullness of your potential in 2022? Alec, what are we doing there today?
I thought we would cover just some general tips and an introduction to what we do. So at Almighty Warriors, we focus on improving your health span. And there's three key areas that we focus on. It's your spiritual growth and nutrition, and then exercise. And between those three, assuming that they're equally weighted, you have a better than average chance of making a permanent impact and improving your health span. And your health span is not lifespan, it's the period with which you are healthy, fit, strong, and able, as opposed to degenerating as we get older. We try to live a healthier life for longer.
Yeah, and we'll hone in on these three different elements, of course, your spiritual growth, your exercise, and your nutrition as we go through the show today. But I think what's also important for people is to realize how interconnected these three parts are. The one feeds into the other. And sometimes, even if you can't fix all three at once, when you fix one, it automatically starts to give you momentum in the other areas.
Yes, and there in that regard, for example, we know that exercise immediately upregulates your emotions and you feel better. So that's a great place to start. But from a bigger picture perspective, it's essential that you start with your spiritual well-being, because everything starts as a thought. You then turn it into a plan, and you turn the plan into actionable steps. So the Bible is very much a call to action, and we need to put what we learn into action. So, if you look at the three areas, what we're saying is that if you focus on only one, you're only focusing on 33% of the whole. If you focus on two, then you're up to 66. And if you're focusing on all three, well, then you've got a really good chance of impacting and making a sustainable improvement to your health span.
Yeah. So one of the things that we learn from the spiritual side, if you study the Bible, one of the clearest things is that because we have this measure of free will, God expects of us to be intentional about our lives, intentional about our spiritual disciplines.
Yes.
We have to be purpose-filled. We were made in his image, and God is purpose-filled. Everything he does has reason, has purpose, and has intent. And that's supposed to be the same with us. That already gives us a clue in how we should be living our lives, not just sort of going through the motions. I think that's one of the biggest threats with the pressures of life, is that we switch to autopilot.
Yeah, there's a great verse in Colossians 4 verse 2. It says, "Be earnest and unwearied and steadfast in your prayer life, being both alert and intent in your prayer and thanksgiving." And there, happy people are intentional about being grateful. And your focus is not on what you haven't got, but rather on what you have got. So, even if we go back all the way to the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had thousands of fruit trees to choose from, but Satan got them to focus on the one that they couldn't have. And by getting them to focus on that, he managed to deceive them. We need to focus on what we've got, not on what we haven't got. And we need to be grateful for what we've got, and build on that. as opposed to focusing on what we haven't got.
It's very difficult to be grateful if you don't pause, because gratefulness sort of wells up when we start reflecting, when we start thinking. I'm just thinking about this, even the story of the prodigal son, when he finds himself in the mud. The Bible uses this beautiful terminology that when he came to himself, this self-realization moment, we all need that, but on a daily basis, to just slow down and realize, okay, no, wait, this is true. This is the reality. This is the perspective I should have, and this is the lie of the enemy. I guess there are practical ways we can get to these reflective moments.
Yeah, I think one of the great ways is journaling, and it's a nice place to start. Is just keep it simple and just write down 3 things that you are really grateful for, and then write down 3 things that you would like to improve on this year. And then from there, you can sort of distill your vision and your purpose for the year, and then turn that into goals. And the goals you can turn into an actionable plan of of steps that you need to go through to get where you want to. But it needs to be intentional, and you need to have a growth mindset in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's important not just for thankfulness, but also for your vision and your purpose. If you think about the story of Habakkuk, when God says, let me read you this quick passage. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon tablets, that he may run that readeth it. Sometimes when we write it down, we're able to see it and read it.
Yeah, and we need to turn it into an actionable plan, and then execute on that on a daily basis. So you need to distill it down into small bite-sized chunks that you can actually achieve. That makes it sustainable.
Okay. Unbearable, uncomfortable, unstoppable is something that you've written down here concerning the process that we can go through.
Yeah, people, whether it's exercise or nutrition, when you're wanting to make a change, it starts out by being in an uncomfortable position to be in, an unbearable position. And then as you stick with it, it just becomes uncomfortable. And then as you stick with it even more, you start seeing the fruits and the benefits of it, and then you become unstoppable.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. Unbearable. Sometimes things feel unbearable. If you persevere through it, it will become uncomfortable, and then eventually you'll just become unstoppable. All right. Also, another question you can ask is not necessarily what you're aiming for, but what you don't want.
Yeah. A lot of people, it's easier for them to actually say what they don't want to happen or to see come to pass than it is to ask them, what they do want. So if you know exactly what you don't want to see, in other words, I don't want to end up in frail care, I don't want to be a burden to my family, then you can use that to actually come up with your plan and your purpose and your vision for the year. And that is actually what you need in order to be able to sustain changes in your nutrition and your exercise.
All right, know who you are in Christ and believe what he says about you. This should be your spiritual foundation, that you are, number one, purpose-filled, that you're intentional, but you realize that God has called you for more and that you'll want to be used by him. To be more effective in our pursuit of doing what God wants us to do, there are practical things we can improve, and this is where maybe the exercise and the nutrition starts to become important as well, Alec.
Yeah, I'll focus firstly on nutrition. And I think the big thing there to realize is that your body is actually a machine, and your nutrition is fueling your machine. And in general, the Western world has moved into what's referred to as the standard American diet, which is we eat whatever we want, whenever we want, in whatever quantity we want. So we are generally overfed. And that leads to all sorts of problems with our nutrition. So, those same 3 become the levers to actually controlling your nutrition. So if you control what you eat, and you control when you eat it, and you control how much you eat. Those are the three levers for controlling your nutritional intake, and that has the one of those will be easier for you to use than others. So, we need to be controlling at least one of them at all times, sometimes two, and occasionally all three. So, for me personally, I really benefit from fasting and intermittent fasting because it's easier for me to control my nutritional requirements through fasting.
And then the importance, of course, of muscular exercise or resistance exercise, maybe is a better terminology. So we've talked about this a lot, but it really is underestimated. Everybody immediately thinks, let me go for a walk, let me go for a run. That's sort of the go-to.
Yeah.
But there's an added benefit to adding some muscle mass for everybody, women, men, old, young, because that really improves eventually your ability to lose weight.
Yeah, so your muscle mass is directly linked to your immune system. So you compromise your muscle mass as you age by about 1% per year. From about 35, 40 years old, you start losing muscle mass unless you're actively doing something to stimulate the development and maintenance of muscle. In other words, doing strength-related exercise and training. So once you've lost 10% of your muscle mass, you've compromised your immune system, and that's obviously not a good place to be.
Yeah, I think another note here, and by the way, the show notes available to people afterwards. We'll give you the directions to get those. But another important thing I think you've mentioned here is that we can very easily become fixated on what the scale says, but the scale shouldn't be our go-to measurement.
Yeah, you mentioned the interchangeability between exercise and nutrition, but there needs to be a clear distinction too, in that your nutrition is what's going to affect your weight. So you don't go to the gym to lose weight. You go to the gym to get fit and strong and healthy and put on muscle mass. You lose weight by controlling what you eat and what you drink. So that is vitally important to understand the difference between the two. And yes, it's not impossible to get into a state where you are exercising and burning fat, but that's really difficult and a lot of hard work and effort. And you also need to understand the role of insulin and how that affects the way you store the energy that you have consumed through what you eat and drink.
Yeah, and if you're going to be getting into this habit of exercise, I think one of the ways that you should, because you now have a vision, you have a goal, you have a purpose, you have the spiritual foundation, you're exercising to connect with that. You're not just exercising to exercise, you're connected to this. Your nutrition then becomes a purposeful. Fuel is often the term. Fuel
Yes.
is often used. If I just think of myself, too often I fall into the trap of only eating for the pleasure of eating, for the taste of eating, not asking myself, is what I'm eating, is it considered fuel, or is this actually hurting the engine, damaging the engine?
Yeah, so I refer to it as fuel for purpose. And if you know what you're going to be doing, then you can fuel accordingly. But exercise and nutrition are medicine to the body. And if you look at it and think about it like that, what you eat and what you consume, people just think of pharmaceuticals as medicine and pills, but that's really not accurate, because every single thing that we eat has an impact on your body. And if you are purposeful and think about what you are eating and consuming and whether it's beneficial or detrimental, then you can make subtle changes like reducing or cutting out sugar and refined carbs and eating more vegetables, eating more proteins, cut out seed oils, eat vegetable oil, eat olive oil, cut out vegetable oils. that will have a very profound difference on your health. And it's not difficult to do. You're just making those subtle changes, cut out snacking, and then try and increase the fasted period of your day. In other words, you don't eat multiple meals. You just try and reduce them into a shorter space of time so that your body, your system has time to use the stored energy that you've got from your meal.
Yeah, and I think another thing to remind ourselves when it comes to nutrition, especially when we want to make good changes, and you can't be too upset for supplement companies and vitamin companies, because their job is to market and sell us something. They've just done so very effectively. I've thought about this a lot. Often we think a meal replacement shake or protein shake is some form of better alternative. It's not the better alternative, though. Food is the primary thing we want to improve on first and fix first, and not just want to take a shortcut, because once you start popping a pill for every vitamin that you're short of, you don't fix that nutritional side. You want to start by making sure that your whole day's nutrition is purpose, and then additional to that.
You want to treat the cause, not the symptom. So if you've got a deficiency and you're just fixing that by fixing the symptom, then you're not addressing the root cause and the root problem. So, for example, with exercise, when we train guys that are in their 40s and 50s, I put a lot of emphasis into strengthening their lower backs. Why? Because we spend all our day sitting and we're sedentary, and then we end up wondering why we've got problems. So we need to address the root cause, and basically people nowadays are really not active enough. So we have to purposefully make time to exercise, because the rest of our day is largely sedentary.
Yeah. If we focus in a little bit more in detail as well, we've mentioned fuel. If you mention fuel, then you think of energy. And if you start thinking of energy, you have to start talking about the role of insulin in the body.
Yeah, so if I can explain that briefly, and at a high level, every single time your body needs to digest something that you've ingested, it produces insulin. And the role of insulin is to convert that into stored energy. And it stores it in one of three places: your liver, your muscles, or fat. If your reserves in your liver and your muscles are full, then your insulin has no option but to store it as fat. So if you are not using the energy that you've got stored adequately from your liver and your muscles, and you are eating frequently, then your body will store that as fat. And then when you exercise and you expend energy, it first uses what's stored in the liver, then the muscles, and then fat. So the first two are easily accessible, but the third isn't. So there's a couple of preconditions that you need to abide by in order to be able to use fat as a fuel source. So firstly, you would need to deplete the stores in your liver and your muscles. And then you need to make sure that you're training at an elevated but not too elevated heart rate. So that's why I say it's really difficult to get to the point where you are burning fat as a fuel source. So it's much easier to control your energy through your nutrition than it is to try and do it with exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've mentioned fasting, but again, fasting is a very effective way of controlling all of these mechanisms.
Yes. So when you fast, you're giving your body time to deplete your stores in your liver and in your muscles. And then if you that creates an environment where if you then train doing, for example, a steady state cardio, in other words, running or cycling or swimming, where you're not going absolutely flat out, you then are able to start using fat as a fuel source. But again, I want to stress that you should be trying to lose or change your body composition, reduce fat, increase muscle mass, which means you need to eat more protein, and you need to do steady state cardio. So that's where things like your walking and running and over a longer period of time and it's actually easier for people to get started by going for a walk and then slowly increasing that and doing a jog, or starting to do things like rucking that we've spoken about, where you carry some weights in a backpack. But you just need to get started.
Another tip we can get from the spiritual side, Alec, in conclusion, is that the Bible is clear that our fight between the flesh and the spirit exists in the mind. Our mind has to be renewed. Our thinking has to change. We have to get new truth to, push out the lies. So just breaking that down, in the brain, our thinking, the way that we feel, the decisions that we make, that's what we want to change. And exercise and nutrition plays such a major role and effect on what's happening just chemically in our brain, which then also improves our spiritual walk with God if we can get these things aligned.
Yeah, you're in a much better position to overcome the challenges of the world that are thrown at you on a daily basis if you are healthy and strong, and if you're up-regulating your brain through eating correctly and exercising, then you're way less susceptible to being depressed or being overwhelmed by situations that you are put into. And we need to remember that Christ came to give us a victorious, overcoming life. And the Bible is full of practical advice on how to do it. But it starts with a thought. Then you've got to turn that thought into a plan and action and on it. So, otherwise you're not going to get there. So, you start with a growth mindset, and then you build that with your hope and your faith, and you need to be in a position where you can love yourself first in order to be able to love others and be useful to those around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, powerful show. Thanks so much, Alec. These notes are available for you on the almightywarrior.me website. Go and visit it anyway. Great resources available there. Sign up for their courses as well. Lots of information that Alec presents to you there. Lots of great links to other resources as well. almightywarrior.me. Thanks so much, Alec.
Pleasure. Thank you, Wilbert, and all the best to the listeners.
We'll chat again next Tuesday. All things health and wellness.